Welcome back. I do a brief 2-second introduction. I think it's important. So we've got Theo Mascara. He runs quite a bit of freight here at Spot for us. So again, long haul, refrigerated, and short haul probably.
Yeah, a little
Drop
bit
trailer,
of everything.
All types of food. And then Alex has a large team.
Yep.
Runs
5 different teams collectively. Those teams handle about 2,000 loads a week.
So a decent amount of freight in. And I want to, this has been probably one of the craziest, probably 4-week stretch. I mean, since I've seen, I mean, it is collectively on par with maybe more tumultuous than COVID. I mean, so I guess sum up, since the last time we were here, non-domiciled was a big topic. We had kind of come down a little bit, and then it seems like in the past 2 weeks, what's the last 2 weeks been for you?
Incredibly tight across the board. You know, you certainly feel a shift in supply. You have your seasonal demand coming from certain commodities, but overall, it's a challenging freight market on the supply side.
When you say supply side, are all days the same? Meaning, like, have you seen anything on end of week, beginning of week, or is it just flat out just tight?
Typically, Mondays and Fridays are easier days.
Okay.
For capacity. Mondays and Fridays are 2 of the toughest days right now. Usually, folks are looking to start their week with a longer haul shipment or kind of plan their route for the week.
Okay.
And it just seems like folks are either not there or they're not looking for the same route.
Alex, on your side, what are you seeing? Is it tightness across the board?
Yeah, generally speaking, I mean, I think you summed it up quite nicely. This is something we really, I haven't personally seen before on the dynamics we're seeing. And just speaking for the broader, first quarter this year, it seems like when we got a little bit of relief, then snowstorm happens and we get a little bit of relief, and then diesel spikes up. And those are certainly drivers of these price spikes that we're seeing, or the rate spikes. But to Theo's point, this is largely capacity driven. And that's becoming more and more evident as this plays out.
When you guys look at, because I agree, I think capacity has been the strangest that we've seen. It felt like 2 weeks ago it was normal. It almost had gone back to a somewhat normal period.
Right.
And then it was like, boom, all of a sudden within days. What do you think has set this thing back into a very weird spot where capacity is extremely tight? Is there anything that you guys hear on the carrier side from dispatchers or whatever that is pushing supply out?
I mean, I really think it comes down to, like, look at non-domiciled CDL regulation. You have some folks that are getting notices saying that they're...
What do you mean?
Carriers are getting notices they're not going to be able to renew
Their CDLs.
Renew their CDLs.
So are they getting this? Are they sending this via text? Are they getting mail, email?
Getting it via email.
And so it just says you're shut down.
Correct.
Is it immediate, or are they saying, is dispatch saying it's immediate, or is it at the end of the?
So I've seen some that say it's immediate, some that say they're not eligible for renewal.
Okay. Are you guys hearing from carriers at all? Because in that scenario, so the carrier gets a text or they get an alert from DOT or FMCSA.
Yeah, DOT, I believe.
Saying that the CDLs are revoked, and it's either at the term or immediate. Are you hearing from dispatchers, or your teams hearing from dispatchers that they're shedding drivers faster?
Yeah, Theo's absolutely correct. I've heard pretty much the same things. I think earlier on, there was a lot of uncertainty of, as far as the non-domicile enforcement on the CDL renewals or issuances. Is this largely posturing? Is this going to actually be the directive that the administration is going to push out? And I don't know, it all kind of bleeds together. But 2 or 3 weeks ago, when they finalized that determination, almost instantly, what Theo just described, you hear drivers getting these notices where they're saying, you won't be renewed, or You will have to come in and recertify, and then you'll be taken into consideration. We're talking 200,000 drivers in a seat that are of legal non-domicile status,
Right.
and only 6,000 will be renewed annually.
Right.
That's going to naturally push out a lot of these drivers very quickly.
When you guys look at that type of driver pool, so driver pool, they probably typically fit into maybe at the large end, 100 to 200 truck fleet, but literally on the lower end, probably lower to 7, 10, 15, 20 truck fleet or operators. A lot of them operate with dispatch services. So like if people aren't aware, like there's a dispatcher overseas or even here in the U.S. that's dispatching for multiple MCs. Mm-hmm. Is there a type of freight that the people that fit in this non-domiciled, they're granted a CDL, type of freight that they typically haul that you guys see more in your day-to-day operations?
Oh, absolutely. For us, I would say those drivers take the less attractive freight, so your long haul or middle mile multi-stop.
Right.
Typically going into markets where there's a little bit of an imbalance. So think of Midwest to Northeast. Get a higher rate per mile going out, take a lower one coming back. Typically going out, trying to go coast to coast. Don't necessarily have a home base, so they're in the truck for the long term.
Right. So almost a freight that maybe not attractive to more regional fleets.
Right.
But a lot of the fleet that, from a shipper's perspective, out of orbit shipments, like resupply, STO type shipments, unplanned or remote type deliveries, long haul remote deliveries. When you guys look at its current state, what do you think is something that we should look for coming into the summer? Because we're not totally into season yet for produce, but that is definitely coming. What do you think people should look for in terms of supply side?
I mean, with summer months, naturally comes an uptick in demand. I'm particularly concerned once we see a resurgence in overall demand, what happens to these spot market quotes? You guys were just speaking to what's the freight profile of a lot of these drivers that are exiting the market due to these new enforcements. It's broadly spot market freight. And that seasonal freight oftentimes falls into that spot market category. So It could get particularly messy in the coming months.
But do you guys see, because it's probably been the most interesting time because of API quoting. So we've talked about this in the past, but a lot of shippers took high volume lanes and took percentages of the lane. So say it moves 100 times, they moved 30 of them to API. So it was variable rating. So if the API was higher than the contract, it would tender on contract. If API was lower, it would tender it to API. So are you seeing API upticks in the past 2 weeks? Have you seen anything behavior-wise that goes along with the supply being tight? So are you seeing more API, less API?
I haven't seen as much API, but there's certainly been more email traffic, phone calls,
Okay.
More activity on a manual bid board, and that doesn't go directly to API. It seems like shippers are wanting to engage more.
Right.
To make sure they have a secured truck.
Right. What about you guys? What are you seeing on?
Yeah, definitely an uptick in API. And each customer is different, and shippers use API quoting for different functions, right? Sometimes they use it just to simply price check the market. Sometimes it's to maybe do a variable tendering against contract. Other times it's just spot market load that came up that there's not a routing guide set up on. But we've definitely seen an uptick in API pings. The variable quoting, you'll likely, just thinking of it practically, I think you'll see a lot of shippers just holding to contract rates as long as they can, because contract rates have not moved hardly much, any.
No,
Really.
Right.
I feel bad for anybody doing a bid that did a bid in November, December,
Yeah.
even in January. I mean, the people saying they're going to hold true to rates is,
It's going to be a lot of turnover.
yeah. I mean, I think we've seen more lane turnover this time than we've seen in a long time, and it's
Yeah.
very interesting. I don't know what, are you seeing a lot of lane turnover? So in that instance, the carrier was awarded, the provider was awarded the freight, but they were awarded in December, November, early January. Are you seeing still continued routing guide failure?
100%. And even, we completed a few mini bids that, were awarded in February, and some of those lanes are already getting turned back in because the provider can't service it.
Yeah. Are you seeing it in regions? Are there any parts of the country? I know we've talked in the past maybe about coming down in some portions of the South, but are there portions of the country, or parts of the country that are very tight, that the capacity you guys see is harder to get?
California, for sure, for us.
Outbound or inbound?
Outbound.
Okay.
That's probably the newer component.
Right.
Of it.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
But California, I would say to start the year, capacity was, I wouldn't say it was abundant, but it certainly wasn't a challenging market like the Midwest,
Right.
Southeast, Northeast that was really impacted by weather, and folks just kind of got behind in outbound shipments from those regions. But California wasn't really involved in a huge price increase. And now, as we're getting into, a transition from Yuma to Salinas, there's that demand. You have the cost of diesel that spikes significantly in California, much higher than, throughout the
Right.
rest of the United States. And I think it's just those things coupled with, drivers leaving the marketplace
Yeah.
due to regulation, that there's just all of these things happening at once, really driving an increase in California.
Yeah, if you think about like the normal seasonal transition, even if we faced weather in certain parts of the country that made it a little bit colder, so harvest wasn't the same, but you're seeing that shock on the non-domiciled. But fuel, what are you guys hearing from fuel? Because to me, like, it's crazy to see how quickly this, like, it turned overnight and added a whole nother level
Yeah.
of stuff that we didn't need. What are your people hearing from the carriers, fuel prices, et cetera?
Yeah, like I said that earlier, just when we thought we were seeing a little bit of relief to where, things at least stopped rising, then, now we have a fuel crisis going on. The thing with fuel is spot market, as many know, but is generally moved through all-in transactions.
So price is all
Yeah,
in.
it's point of sale. It's a quick transaction. You're negotiating in terms of all-in rate. Now, shippers traditionally have a fuel surcharge that accompanies a line haul rate, but oftentimes that fuel surcharge payout isn't the full fuel expense.
It's a weekend in
Yeah.
arrears, right? It
Yeah.
looks back.
Correct. And while it provides some elasticity to the price, relative to the price of diesel on the road, it doesn't fully compensate on a lot of fuel tables that we see. So that's naturally these carriers are going to start going, and it's going to affect the line haul rates in the
Right.
spot market.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was even the last time fuel got high. You watched some of the people renegotiate either fuel caps, so saying the fuel surcharge table is only going to go here, and you agree to it, or you started to see fuel efficiency numbers go from a 6 to 8, 9 miles in between. So the fuel table jumps very slowly, and it's paid a week or 2 weeks in arrears. So fuel is leveraged. My fear is small fleets that run mostly spot market transactions, all-in transactions, with fuel escalating very quickly. We pay them faster, but it still is in arrears to what they're paying today. So they're paying now, and they're either getting, if they're factoring, they're getting paid sooner, but if not, they're getting paid in 30 days or 20 some days, and that's tough. Do you fear cost escalations, or do you see it impact small fleets more? Do you guys hear from smaller fleets that are either not running in areas, delaying maintenance, taking drivers off the road? Is there anything you see or hear?
I haven't had any that are taking drivers off the road due to fuel yet or delaying maintenance, but it was certainly, as fuel spiked right away, having conversations with some smaller fleets that run some dedicated regional 200-mile lanes for us. They're immediately saying, your increase in our line haul plus fuel surcharge rate just doesn't cover what the expenses were. Sat down, had a conversation with them, and broke out the numbers, and they're right, it doesn't.
Right.
So to Alex's point, had to renegotiate a line haul just to make sure they're taken care of so they can continue to operate
Right.
and make sure the lane runs smooth.
Well, even looking at refrigerated freight, where you have the unit,
Right.
you have 50 or 100 gallons underneath. You've got the tractor itself. But then if you're going to load getting out of California, you're going to pay heavy out of Cali.
Right.
And then you've got to move through. So you almost have to really look at where you're going to fuel, how much weight you're putting on board the tractor or the trailer, and making sure you've aligned enough to get the most optimal route and reduce cost.
Yeah, and back to your original question, how does this affect the small to mid-sized fleets? I think they're the most exposed in the asset classes if they're tied to contract rates,
Right.
especially any rates that they may be tied to for the full term of the year. If you look at the Class 8 truck order numbers, they look fantastic. They look like it appears that there's a resurgence of capacity being added with the spike or the elevated rate environment. Carriers are going and adding trucks to their fleets. That's not the case. A lot of these fleets have been putting off replenishing fleets. We've got new EPA regulations that are coming into effect next year, the EPA 2027 regulations, which will increase the amount of DEF that's being used by these engines. And the overall consensus within the industry is that's going to lead to higher operating costs, higher maintenance costs, and a more expensive unit out of the gate off the lot. So a lot of that Class 8 order activity is fleets preloading or getting in front of those new regulations so they can be grandfathered in.
But it almost feels it's interesting to watch the pressure on the routing guide, because I feel like we looked at the API numbers, and during the tightest weeks, our API numbers on the aggregate go down. So back to that variable rating, they're almost going back out and trying to tender on like standard routing guide freight or over lever contract carriers, because a lot of shippers cut routing guides down. I mean, did you guys see the majority of shippers cutting routing guide depth down? And do you hear much change in that area? So going from a primary to a secondary, or ratio splitting, primary, secondary?
Earlier we were speaking to these mini bids. To quickly answer your question, yes, absolutely. I'm seeing mostly all of my customers shrink down not only the number of carriers they have within their network, they're focusing on the serious players, their true partners, but also in their spot market boards too. Because we're seeing this behavior on mini bids where the same lanes are now maybe on their third mini bid because of turnover from one carrier to the next. We're seeing on the bid boards, a lot of times we can tag those loads, and the same loads are going out to the spot market bid 5 or 6 times over the course of 3 weeks if they're tendered far enough in advance. And that, it doesn't take a ton of expertise to know that that's a waste of time and resources to sit there and just regenerate lane rates like that.
There's an interesting, it's kind of crazy on carrier, broker, whatever it is, a vendor provider turnover on a lane. So the person had the lane for 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. And then on a bid, somebody came in lower. How often when you see that, so I call it lane turnover or provider turnover, how often when you see that, how often do you see that new provider fail for reasons that the lane demands certain service, it demands certain cost structures, so whether it's a late night receiver, early shipper, extended transit time, detention, etc. How often do you see when that turnover happens that lane is really back out on a mini bid?
I would say we see it annually with some lanes. Some of it has mainly on lanes that have tight turnaround time. So I think of like low lead time, drop trailer pool. To your point, evening receiving. I mean, there's probably 20 to 30 lanes with a few customers to see annually that are always on a mini bid just due to turnover of that nature.
Are you seeing any strategies on lane renewals that are different than they were 5 years ago? So shippers interacting with vendors. Have you seen a change in renewal process?
Yeah, I am seeing, some shippers strategically time their bid timing outside of holidays or any time period where it may.
In more slow periods.
Correct.
Right. I've seen more, and I like this. Primary or strategic get more of like a rolling renewal or early renewal, and to me that there's been a long-term partnership, and it really works in lanes that you were talking about where the volume is very consistent. So the deviation between week to week, day to day, month to month is not very high. It's very consistent, so it's shipping on the same times. You can really have a very level cost structure and not have to face the whims of the market today. I think that's something that's interesting. And do you see, when you guys deal with lanes, what are attributes that drive cost in lanes? Is it day of the week? Is it ship time, weight, load, unload efficiency? What drives up cost?
I would say the time of receiving, I think, drives up the cost, or
What's the
time of
worst?
loading. Depending on your mileage, I would say any time in the evening after 1800.
Yeah, so driver efficiency.
Right. You have a limited driver pool. Most of those guys are timed out. So if it's a 200-mile run and the only loading time and the shipper will only live load and the only available appointments at 0400,
Yeah.
I mean, what do you do?
Right.
But that's how a lot of these shippers and receivers operate, and you have to adapt. But there's a price increase in the lane for that
Yeah.
reason.
Yeah, we did this one time. We looked at it. We took all the shipments, like the average delivery windows, the average delivery windows versus the average pickup windows, and most trucks when they arrive are ready to go was early in the morning. So most of them would check in and start moving early, so 6, 7 in the morning to get to. Most receiving happened between 8 to 11, and then you saw a lot of pickups happen in the afternoon. So if you have a 14-hour work day and you can drive for 11 hours and you have to take certain breaks within, if you're starting early in the morning and moving, the clock's starting to go away. And by the time you have to pick up at night, it really, really increases cost. And you see more fleets. It's hard to operate in those constraints where on one side you want to deliver early and the other side they want you to pick up.
Right.
So you do see cost increases in those time bands.
Yeah, and those are the lanes you see a lot of, like what we were just speaking about, that keep reoccurring on mini bids or constantly on the spot market, where there's just the more variables you put in to
Right.
a lane or a load that make it more complex. Naturally, it's going to drive your rates up. He's speaking to holdover times. We deal with facilities that maybe don't ship on weekends, so you have to hold it over one day, but it's not enough to get a 34-hour
On
reset
the long
in.
transit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have certain customers that have very, very high trailer quality requirements. That does limit your carrier pool. You have to target specific equipment that meets those needs. Not every trailer on the road, it's brand spanking new and looks like it just came off of the dealer lot. If that's what you need and that's the requirements, that's part of the load. But that is going to constrain your available capacity that you can go after. It's things
Right.
like that drive up the rates.
There's something that I think is it's part of every market shift, and it's something that I love to watch. And the reason being, it can tell when a market has really flipped or started moving in a certain direction, and that's when shippers or vendors and customers move back and forth between CPU and delivered or prepaid and ad type freight. And so if it's a retailer buying from a manufacturer, if they want customer pickup, they'll either have a backhaul fleet or they'll negotiate their own third-party fleet to come in and pick up the load, and there's an agreed-upon price there. There's also the prepaid and ad or delivered pricing where the vendor sells the product and gives a price. What do you guys? Well, let me back up. So during market shifts, you feel those go back and forth. You'll say people, hey, we're going to go back to delivered, if the market gets real soft, they're going to go back into CPU because they can save money or generate more buying power. What are you guys seeing in the front lines of this? Are you seeing any conversion yet between CPU and delivered?
I've seen quite a bit the past month.
Okay.
It really even started in December that we started to see more of that activity. So if you think right after Thanksgiving, things got crazy towards the end of the year. Usually November is pretty busy. December, see a little bit of tapering off because most, Christmas freight is already in warehouses and ready for season. But since then, it's been almost a weekly. Everyone's looking to renegotiate rates.
Yeah. So renegotiate between the CPU
Right.
and the delivered pricing.
Yeah.
Are you seeing much of that?
Yeah, absolutely. Traditionally speaking, it's typically, whoever the end party is that's purchasing the truckload typically gets to make the determination if they want to handle the freight or if the vendor handles it, right? So when we see pricing downswings, you'll often see a big shift to CPU. Where it gets around pretty quick these days.
Yeah.
Rates are coming down. They do some, little shopping and,
Yeah.
hey, we've identified some savings. We're going to take it on. And of course, the inverse when we have times like this where, the reality of where the market's going is becoming pretty clear. They take a look at things, look at these increases they're taking on and saying, hey, you know what? You guys handle it.
Yeah. Well, I think, too, on the other one that's interesting is service. So on a delivered service, people are looking at it, not getting the loads in the manner in which they want them. It's backing up. And then on the other side of that, on the CPU side, if the truck doesn't come to it can really screw up your loading too. So it causes, but a lot of times you see that negotiation move, hey, you can't deliver my loads on time. I'm going to come get them. By the way, what's my budget? And then they're saying that budget's not even realistic. And so that's when it goes back and forth. But it's been, I hear more and more of it on the kind of the path of like what's going on. And so it usually tells me when something started to really flip, you start to feel that. Flatbeds, I want to talk about flatbeds for a second. 'Cause I've never,
It's the Wild West.
I've never seen it change this manner. Do you guys have you seen any of this, heard any of this?
I can tell you from experience, we ship some, large steel coils pretty frequently, and Midwest to PA rates are 30% higher than what we were paying not long ago. It's it's quite the shift. They were going up incrementally.
And not long ago being
not long ago,
like a month ago.
Yeah. So we were, probably they were starting to creep up in December, and then since the start of the year, it's just continued to increase.
Yeah. What are you guys seeing?
Yeah, I mean, we do our fair share these days of flatbeds, and I've never seen flatbed like this.
Yeah, it is crazy.
We're almost to that environment like we kind of saw it in COVID in the broader market, not specific to flatbeds, but it's becoming very difficult to even put long-term pricing in for something that's not consistent.
Right.
It becomes a large guessing game, and it's so different day to day. It's just one of those segments where Monday, Tuesday, it may not be that bad, and then the rest of the week you're deadheading trucks literally 300 400 miles to go
To get a truck.
just to get a truck to make the pickup.
I can't tell what it is. I mean, some people say it's data centers, these new data centers, but I don't know how many are actually under construction, how many are being pulled, because you're not like housing's not going way off the charts here, and so sectors that you would typically see you're not seeing huge demand.
No.
But it is short. I've never seen anything quite like it. I mean, it's to the point in certain areas. Really, one of the only options is cost plus. I mean, where is the truck? Can you get the truck just to maintain a flow of capacity in and out of the facility, which I've never seen that happen before. Do you guys, when you look at this demand piece or supply side, as we come into the produce season, which is soon to begin, right? April, we'll get moving. What type of trailer do you think will be the tightest? So we know flatbeds are number one. What's next? What do you think? Where are you going to see constraint?
I think reefer, without question. I mean, the reefer market has been constrained for several months now.
Yeah.
Obviously some of that was weather driven, but it's been, I think, a 5-week decline in average rate per mile for reefer, but it's not a significant decline.
Yeah.
And we're still significantly above where we were last year
On cost.
on cost.
Yeah. How's Florida?
Florida it's getting up there, but Florida's okay right now.
Okay. Are trucks still wanting to go down that way?
Depends who you ask. I mean, some folks want to go, but it's. I'll say this: people aren't dying to go to Florida yet.
But it goes back to your earlier point, though. There was a subset of carriers that did run
Right.
freight to inopportune markets. They do it for higher rates, obviously, but if that driver pool is gone, it's going to squeeze the same few pretty heavy. When does the summer pre-build, getting in for beverage season and getting going? When does that hit, and when does that get hot and heavy and hit the drive-in?
Pretty much starting now.
Okay.
Yeah, we're seeing some pre-build activity, but it'll start to get real hot and heavy here next month, in the coming weeks, and from there on out, it's pretty much through the summer.
What's interesting in that time period, because it's going to pull more. It's shorter haul, unless you have more STO activity, but generally that's going to be pulling more trucks in. Automotive typically will pick up. Produce starts to move. If it's tight now, typically in a typical year, you really get tight when you get into the April, May, and get ready for the summer season, which peak weeks will be that 2 weeks before 4th of July. That's when the height of all shipping happens. And we have DOT week, enforcement week coming the first week in May, I think. So
it's going to be a good May.
It's going to be a busy May. So I'm sure my hair will get more gray, but it has been an ever-changing. There's a lot of words that I probably never would have said 10 years ago, and we started 17 years ago. You never would have heard of ELP, even though it existed. Non-domiciled never was a word. The mini bids, micro bids, all the different types of bid
Chameleon
strategies.
carriers.
Yeah, chameleon carriers.
Backdoor ELDs.
Fake driving schools, insurance, cargo theft. Another big thing impacting the industry. You never would have said those words, and the speed at which it's coming is something that I've never. I mean, the amount of change is unbelievable. So it's good.
I just never thought there would be a day where our industry is so much in the mainstream when it comes to the news cycle.
I mean, thinking about the fuel, if you talk, if it goes up like 40 cents, 40%, their cost, so operating cost goes up, it translates into 10 cents per mile. So you start incrementally increasing and everybody's different.
Right.
Everybody operates much different. So just on average, talking about fuel increase as a percent of fuel increase, what it does to cost to operate that truck. And eventually you think about produce has to move. So somebody has to take that cost on. But then if you take capacity out, there's less trucks. And so it could really impact cost faster.
Driver pay is about half the equation for these carriers too. And, the removal of these non-domiciled drivers is a very real thing, not to be redundant, but it's happening now. We're going to have to fill those seats some way. Right. And that usually leads to more attractive pay.
Right. And cost.
Yep.
April, what's going to happen?
I think California is going to have a good start to the produce season. I think there's going to be some challenges. I think rates are going to continue to rise.
Okay.
I think 30 days from now, rates will be higher.
Yeah.
Maybe we see a little relief in certain segments, but I'm not overly optimistic we'll see a big turnaround on a cost standpoint.
For me, it's a mixed bag. Does on the demand side, there's mixed signals, more flat to down. How will fuel impact the economy longer term? Is there more chance of inflation? Do we see consumers lose more buying power? And so does that keep the economy slow and steady? I do think on this side, this time, supply is the biggest picture. So I don't. It's been one of the most interesting supply side, and how fast will people try to catch up capacity into the market? People are moving up and down and getting more equipment is is tough. And I think the bid cycles, the shorter bid cycles, the API has impacted how people buy equipment, how they staff. And so we're forever changed. But it probably will be a supply issue in April. And then getting into season, it could get really tight. So, well, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
It's been fun.
Yeah. Thanks for having
All
us.
right. We'll see you.